Hello, I'm Joy Zaremka, the author of The Pigment of Your Imagination. I'm here at the Institute for Policy Studies with Dedrick Muhammad. Dedrick Muhammad is the senior organizer and research assistant for the program on inequality and the common good here at the Institute for Policy Studies. He has recently released an eye-opening report entitled 40 Years Later, The Unrealized American Dream, and we have the opportunity today to talk to him about this report. Dedrick, can you tell us a little bit about this report and some of the findings that you came up with?
Sure. This report, 40 Years Later, The Unrealized American Dream, looks at where America was in terms of the black-white race divide in 1968 compared to where we are today in 2008. And what it finds is that there are places where there has been progress. We see that in terms of segregation, African Americans are less segregated than they have been throughout most of the 20th century. The sad part is that African Americans are still the most segregated racialized group in this country. So that is a point where we still need to do a lot more work. On the positive side, you can look that African Americans have made significant progress in education. College graduation rates has increased by 400%. High school attainment, getting a high school diploma or GED, has increased by over 200% since around that time of 1968. But what the report highlights is that even though there has been this progress, particularly in education, there hasn't been a corresponding economic advancement. That in 1967, African Americans were making 54 cents on every dollar white Americans were making in terms of per capita income. In 2005, we see that African Americans were making 57 cents on every dollar that white Americans were making in terms of per capita income. So what that means is over a 40-year period, African Americans have only caught up to white Americans by 3 cents. And so it would take, at that rate, another 530-something years for African Americans to reach income equality with white Americans. And so I think this report really helps highlight that there still is a serious black-white racial divide in this country.
And why does the report focus exclusively on black and white inequality?
Well, the report really wanted to focus on the tradition and spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King, and even though Dr. Martin Luther King had a universal message, he came to his universal message through a particular experience and through a particular struggle, and that was a focus in the attainment of civil rights for African Americans. Now, in that struggle for civil rights for African Americans, it expanded the rights of all Americans, had particular benefits for women, for immigrants from non-European countries, for the disabled. It really was civil rights for all Americans. And I believe, and Dr. King also stated this, that he thought a focus on how to bridge the economic racial divide would also help all working class and lower class Americans and strengthen the economy of the country overall. So I was trying to stay in the spirit of Dr. King, and if people get a chance to look at this report, they'll also see that throughout the report we constantly refer back to the words of Dr. King to see what he was saying in 1968 and see how it applied to this current situation in 2008.
Now let's talk a little bit about solutions. I know that there are a lot of economic empowerment programs that aren't race-based. Do you think those would help the African-American white racial divide that you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, I think this gets to a larger question of race and class, or race and economics. And I think there's sometimes a common misperception that racism or racial divide comes from one group of people not liking the way another group of people look. So it's just something about prejudice with people of color. But really what we're looking at is that race in this country, the racial divide came from economic exploitation of people. I mean, particularly in the African American situation, African Americans were brought here as Africans to be the wealth of white Americans as slaves and to build the wealth of this country, and then were not allowed to share in that wealth. And really, if you think about it, African Americans weren't given access, even under the law, to this wealth until, let's say, to the 1960s, where segregation was finally torn apart, at least in law. So I think, Dr. King, when he promoted programs to help end the black-white divide, he understood that a universal program that was no longer hindered by segregation laws would be of particular benefit to African Americans and help all Americans. And I think in 2008 we can have programs that are focused on working class, middle class people that will help all Americans, but will have a unique effect on African Americans because we'll finally get some social investment that we can fully participate in, while in the past we were not allowed to participate in the wealth building programs of the United States.
hope people take away from this report?
What I hope people take from this report 40 years later is that Dr. King died not after a victory, but died on the battlefield. That Dr. King saw in 67, 68, that America had far to go in bridging the black-white racial divide, and he saw the foundation of that as being a black-white economic divide. And so oftentimes when we celebrate his birthday every January, I feel that people are celebrating as if we had a victory, instead of we need to be remembering and rededicating ourselves to that struggle which he so valiantly fought. And so I hope that people take from this report that we still have a stark black-white racial divide in this country, that we need to rededicate ourselves to ending this so we can truly celebrate the legacy of Dr. King and a true victory in the battle in which he fought and died in.
This sounds like an amazing report. How would one go about getting a copy of it?
To get a copy of the report, I would suggest most people would just Google the Institute for Policy Studies, or they can go to a website, inequality.org. They can get this report. They can get more information on where the country is economically, economic inequality overall, and particularly the black-white economic divide. So again, I would suggest going to the Institute for Policy Studies website. You can just Google that, or you can go to inequality.org.
Thank you so much, Dedrick.
Thank you.